Hi everyone, my name is Kartik and my channel is about mental models. In this video I'll be talking about hindsight bias. There are times when we say something like, I knew this was going to happen, or that was bound to happen, or even I said that would happen. And these are all different levels of hindsight bias. Once an outcome is known, people are likely to believe they could have predicted the outcome, or they believe they did predict the outcome, when in reality they did not or could not have predicted it. So they predicted it or could have predicted it, and that's essentially what hindsight bias is. So let's look at the three statements I've just said a moment ago. So let's look at I said that would happen. So in this case, let's say you are going from London to Scotland, you're driving from London to Scotland, and you set off at 6 a.m. And when you set off, you say that you will arrive at lunchtime. So that's what you say at 6 a.m. And you arrive at, say, 2:30 p.m. And when you do arrive, you say, I told you that we would arrive before the evening. So that's at 2:30 p.m. and this is at 6 a.m. this statement here. And even though you said, I told you that we would arrive before the evening, well, you actually didn't say that. You said lunchtime, and you didn't give a time either. You said it will be around lunchtime, so you didn't say 2:30 either. And this is known as memory bias, which is one of the levels of hindsight bias. Now let's look at the statement, that was bound to happen. That was bound to happen. So you see a child walking along a brick wall. So brick wall, and you see a child walking along it, and unfortunately they fall off. And so you're looking at all of this, that's you looking at that, and they fall off. Now after they fall off and they are on the floor, you say something along the lines of, that was bound to happen. Or even, that was always going to happen. Or even, it was inevitable. Well, actually, it wasn't inevitable. The child may not have fallen off, but in this case, they did. And if you are saying things like that, then this is known as inevitability bias, which is another level of hindsight bias. And thirdly, because I had three statements, let's look at the I knew this would happen. So your favourite football team is playing a match and they lose. So let's say football team loses 1-0. And at the final whistle, so the final whistle blows, you say something along the lines of, I knew they were going to lose the match. And so this is an example of this specific one. Another small example is, let's say you have an exam, and after the exam finishes, so you have an exam, and after the exam finishes, you say something along the lines of, I knew that question would come up in the paper. But before that same exam, while studying, you would have said something along the lines of, I should study these topics as a topic, or this kind of a question may come up in the exam. So both of these examples here are known as predictability bias. And so these are the three levels. 1, 2, 3. And so in each of these, you incorrectly believe with hindsight that you could have predicted the future or the outcome. Now this brings me nicely on to analysing events, in that knowing the outcome of an event reveals what people should have done differently. And so, in other words, with hindsight, i.e. looking back at an event, it is easy to identify the things people should have done or not done to avoid or change the outcome of that event. So, in other words, you've got sort of an input, you've got the event, and you've got the outcome of that event. And you're sort of, at this point here, looking back, analysing, going all the way back. And you're sort of looking at the event and saying people should have done something differently, or not done something, or done something else, and then that would have changed the outcome. But the key point to remember, or the key point here, is that at the time of the event, the people sort of in the event doing what they're doing do not know the outcome. And so they respond to it, the event, they respond to the event as they perceive it in that moment. And so the responses in an event is a function of several factors. So that's the responses in an event. And these factors are the immediate demands of the situation, the tasks that are being performed. The training and experience of the people. If there are any sort of formal procedures, there may be implicit goals of the person. And here, between the formal procedures and the implicit goals, you may have a conflict of interest as well. And then there is, of course, the reality of how tasks are completed. So you've got sort of training, you've got formal procedures, you've got the performance of tasks, but how they're done in reality may be another function and different to all of those things. And so these are the functions to the responses in an event. And at the heart of this are the characteristics and limitations of human cognitive processes. And so, characteristics and limitations of human cognitive processes which influence how one responds in an event. This bias is a concern because if we say, I knew that would happen, or the feeling that everything is obvious, then we start saying, I know what will happen, or that the future is predictable. And so the problem with this bias is that it can lead to overconfidence. And also short-sightedness. So how do we overcome this bias? And I'm sort of running out of room, so I'll try and put it here. So how do we overcome this bias? Number one, make explicit predictions. So going back to the Scotland drive at 6 a.m, if you're making the prediction to say you're going to arrive by lunchtime, then give it a time. What does lunchtime mean? Is it 12 noon, 1 o'clock, 2:30? Or if you're going to say that we should arrive before the evening, specify that. Make it tighter. Don't make it woolly or fuzzy. Make it strong and make it explicit and accurate. And the second thing is create and keep a record. Of your decisions together with inputs and conditions. So you've got your inputs, conditions, and then your actual decision. So record that, and then we can use this record to analyze what went wrong with incorrect decisions. We can sort of identify if we used the wrong inputs, or if we misinterpreted the conditions or used the wrong conditions. And so we can use this record. This log also helps against overconfidence by showing us our real forecasting ability. We're noting down our decisions so we know if they were successful or not, as well as identifying where things went wrong with the inputs and the conditions. And finally, metacognition. Now, I will explain this in another video in more detail, but in relation to hindsight bias, it is to stand back from the thought and not look at it as a fact, but reflect on it to see the patterns and be able to recognize them. So the actual thought process, and recognize those thought process patterns in the future, such that we can say this feels or sounds like hindsight bias again. So it's to identify patterns in thought. So that's metacognition. And by these three techniques, we can overcome hindsight bias. And that is hindsight bias in a nutshell. And that's all for this video. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, please like and subscribe to my channel, and I will see you in the next one with another cognitive bias video. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.